Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to let people filter into the room here this evening. We've got a bunch of RSVPs for this event, and we're excited to have you all here. I was joking with Jukka before I opened the webinar that we should have called this our electric snowblower webinar. We should have dusted that one off, given the kind of day that we're all having here, at least in the Twin Cities. But Jukka, have you used your snowblower yet today?
Not today. I will after this one. So after the event here, I'll go outside and clear the areas with that. So looking forward to it.
Your electric snowblower was new last year, wasn't it?
I actually haven't had it new. I bought it as a used one.
Okay,
so
new to you
in that
last
way,
year.
New to me, yes.
Okay.
But I bought it used, so I'm sure it's like 5 years old now.
Okay,
but
all right.
Still going strong.
Perfect. Well, I guess with that, we can end our snowblower chat and dive into today's webinar. So hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here to our 2023 EV Outlook and Virtual Happy Hour webinar. My name is Jo Olson. I'm the Senior Director of Communications and Engagement at Fresh Energy, and today's event is actually co-hosted between Fresh Energy and Shift to Electric. I was remembering, Jukka, that I think this is our 4th year doing this. Is that right?
Could be.
Either way.
Very well be.
It's backed by popular demand. We do it every year. And this year, I guess I say this every year, but this year we have a lot to talk about. But first, I want to take a few moments to do a little bit of housekeeping. People will notice, I believe, that I have opened the chat. So anyone can use the chat. I encourage you to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, how many inches of snow you got today, and yeah, why you're joining us. So the chat is open, but we will have an entire segment of today's webinar dedicated to Q&A. Jukka and I made sure to book a lot of time for that. So you'll notice there's also a Q&A function. So please use that. If you hover over, there's like a little Q&A window in the bottom of your screen and click on that. You can submit a question, you can upvote questions, do all kinds of stuff there. So if a question pops into your head along the way, just drop it in there and Jukka and I will make sure to get to it at the end of the webinar. So let's move on to the agenda. Like I said, we've got a ton to cover today. We'll be discussing federal investments in electric transportation, the latest market developments and trends, Minnesota's EV landscape, best sellers and contenders, and then also taking your questions. But first, let's do a quick round of introductions. So welcome to my co-hosts today. Jukka Kukkonen. Jukka is the Chief EV Educator with Shift to Electric and an EV consultant with Fresh Energy. And welcome also to MK Anderson, my colleague. MK is the Senior Policy Associate on our Energy Transition team here at Fresh Energy. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm really grateful to have you. Okay, so before we dive into all the good stuff, I want to talk about the emissions landscape here in Minnesota. This chart is published each year by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And keep in mind that the most recent recommendations from the world scientists are for emissions across every sector to drop by about 50% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. And while transportation emissions have declined a bit from past years, they are now our largest source of emissions in Minnesota and nationwide, which is why how we get around, whether we're driving an EV, taking transit, walking, or rolling, like bike, scooter, what have you, it all makes a really big difference. And some recent federal actions and investments are stimulating electric transportation, transit, and infrastructure in the United States. So in case you didn't hear, on November 15th, 2021, President Biden signed into law the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, also known as EJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And then on August 16th, 2022, he also signed the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, into law. And we can and have held entire presentations about both of those, but that's not exactly what today's about. We're just setting the scene for this federal investments conversation. So within IIJA, it has some important investments in climate and clean energy that are going to contribute to addressing the climate crisis and funnel about $1.2 trillion into states, and about 7.3 billion of which has been allocated to Minnesota. These funds are going to go toward much needed investments in electric transportation infrastructure, electric transit, and more. However, in order to secure those funds that Minnesotans are entitled to, our legislature, the Minnesota legislature, must approve state matching funds. And now to move on to the IRA. The IRA is effectively the largest investment in climate action in US history, and it's going to result in about 1 billion metric tons of annual emissions reductions by 2030. And a lot of that includes consumers and EVs. And MK is going to talk about that a bit today. So MK, I'm going to pass the mic over to you. If you could give us the scoop on some federal action within EJA and the IRA.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. So hi, everybody. Like Joe said, my name is MK Anderson. I'm the Senior Policy Associate on our Clean Transportation team. And so electric transportation in IIJA. The IIJA includes a lot of really great programs for transportation decarbonization and electrification of the transportation system. And one of those great programs is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, or NEVI. So this program provides funding for 2 states to install fast charging stations for electric vehicles throughout their state. Minnesota is slated to receive $68 million in federal investment from the NEVI program over the next 5 years to build out a network of DC fast chargers. The $68 million investment will require a 20% match. That should come from the state, especially considering our large surplus, but can also come from private sources if needed. Each state under the NEVI program has to build out their alternative fuel corridors first, meaning that the interstates and highways that are designated as alternative fuel corridors, which is another federal program, in Minnesota, those 2 corridors are 94 and 35. So all of those corridors must have electric vehicle charging station that meets the NEVI requirements every 50 miles along those interstates, and they also have to be within 1 mile of the interstate. Minnesota is expected to almost fully build out our 2 alternative fuel corridors in year 1, which means that most of the funds year 2 and all of the funds year 3 and on can be focused on installing infrastructure beyond those 2 corridors. Just a note about equitable implementation. So to ensure equitable implementation of funds and programs through IIJA, it's really important that diverse voices have a seat at the table from day 1 to be able to represent their needs and goals directly. And this starts with making sure that those diverse voices have the key information that they need to participate in the development and even the dreaming up stages of these projects for these programs. And with all these programs, it's really crucial to understand the unique needs, goals, issues, and opportunities of each community that that a project or even a small part of a project is going to be in, so that we can ensure that these projects are not creating unnecessary and unintentional burdens to the community and then leaving those assets stranded and not utilized. The IIJA also has a ton of programs for both low and no carbon school buses as well as transit buses. So having access to reliable transportation is key to accessing opportunities like employment, education, and healthcare. And for a lot of people, they don't have access to a single-use vehicle. So it's really important to make sure there's access to public transportation. Exposure from the diesel emissions from diesel buses and other diesel, medium, and heavy duty vehicles can lead to higher rates of asthma, respiratory disease, and premature death caused by air pollution in the affected communities. So increasing public transportation for all, but especially for low-income communities and communities with a high air pollution burden, is an equity and environmental justice issue. Increasing access to public transportation will reduce emissions and therefore reduce some of the burdens that are caused by air pollution and diesel emissions. And then I just wanted to put a plug in for some engagement. Just keep your eye out for requests for stakeholder input from state agencies for some of these programs coming through IIJA and IRA, as well as at the Public Utilities Commission. It'll be really important to hear everybody's voices and what they want the money to go to in the state. And then just touching on two great things that came out of the IRA, the clean vehicles credit, which is up to $75,000 at a point of sale, if certain criteria are met. And those criteria are phased in amounts of the minerals that are in the battery, where they're sourced from, and then where that battery is put together, essentially. And then so that clean vehicle credit is kind of a revamp of the current clean vehicle credit. And then they added an additional credit, which is really exciting, the new previously owned clean vehicle credit. So that means that people can get up to $4,000 or 30%, whichever is lowest, of a vehicle cost, again, at the point of sale for a used EV.
MK, thank you so much.
Yes,
I
thank
really appreciate it. I know that you have had a very long day, so we're gonna cut you loose now if
Thank
you'd like to depart. And Jukka and I will take it from here, and we'll do our best to answer questions during the Q&A. Jukka, did you have anything to add on IRA and EVs, or should I just stop sharing and pass things over to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of different hoops to jump through in all of those things, and we can definitely talk more about that during the Q&A. So if people want to talk about it, we have more details about it at that point. Just want to point out that the point of sale is not starting beginning of next year; it'll start in 2 years. So just so that people are aware of that. So that's that. But again,
Perfect.
we can go into details a little later if people have questions about it.
Thank you, Jukka, and thank you, MK. So I just stopped sharing my screen. So Jukka, you can take over from here. And I want to remind folks too that the chat is open. So tell us where you are, where you're joining us from, maybe how many inches of snow you've had, or maybe wish you had. And we're going to dive into the facts now with Jukka.
All right, we'll go there. Can you see my screen now well there?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, very good. So good evening, everyone. My name is Jukka Kukkonen, company Shift to Electric, and I work closely with Fresh Energy on all of these clean transportation things, especially, of course, with electric cars. And I will talk a little bit about the market. I will talk about some of the vehicles that are coming to the market. What are some of the tips of buying or either new or used vehicle coming up, and all of that good stuff. And then we'll have plenty of time for you to ask any questions you have about the market or any things that you want to discuss about. So we'll go to that then later. Let's start to look at what's the market like right now. So we can see that we have seen a very, very strong growth now in last 2 years in the US market for EVs. We have grown from 2% up to about 7% right now with the market. And as I will point out a couple of times later, is that this is right now, there's plenty of demand in the market. Now it's just about the supply. So if we would have more supply available, this could be double these numbers very easily right now. But it's still a good growth to see. When we look at the Minnesota, then we have also seen a very good growth there, as you can see. Plug-in hybrid vehicles, the green one, and the battery electric vehicles, the yellow one there. And right now, if in federal level, in the whole nationwide, we are around 7%. In Minnesota, we are about half of that, or a little over 3% right now. So it's a pretty decent situation for us again, because our challenge has been that we have just not gotten the vehicles here. So people, even if they want to buy an EV, it's really hard to find them. I was just talking with Jo about her challenge that she has had trying to find the right vehicle recently, and that's what we are facing. So hopefully next year we'll have a better supply for it. It has been increasing, but it has been increasing slowly. If we do a comparison then again to my country of origin, Finland, you can see there the green area there is EVs, so battery electric vehicle and plug-in hybrids there. That's the green area, the blue line there that is growing. And if you look at that, you can see that Finland was in 2019 about where we are right now, growing close to the 10% line there, starting from like 5, growing to the 10%. So that was 3 years ago. Last year, they were over 30%. This year, they have been over 40% in many months. Think about how fast the growth can happen. And Finland, of course, is very good comparison market for Minnesota here for us because they are much more northern country than where we are. They're in the same latitude as Alaska. Their winters are very similar to us. They are actually 1/3 bigger than what Minnesota is, and they have the same amount of population. So people drive long distances in Finland in winter conditions and so forth. So it's a very comparable market, and you can see how strong the growth has been in recent years. And that's where we are right now. People are starting to realize that EVs are just better vehicles, and they are starting to move to that. And that's very, very good to see. So what are people thinking about EVs here in the US right now? Well, JD Power did a study last fall, and they asked from buying people who were buying any vehicle right now, is like, what are you thinking about EVs? And 20% of the people say that they strongly favor EVs, and that's great. If we are right now, that's 7% market share, 20% of the buying population is saying, yep, I would love to have an EV as long as I could find the car that would work for me. So there's already a growth opportunity right there. And then the interesting thing about this study was that 60% of people said that, yeah, I'm interested in EVs, but I would like to know more. And this is where our activities and our efforts really become valuable, when we can talk with people and share with them information about EVs. What is it like to drive, own, and charge EVs, and just whatever we know about EVs, have a good discussions about it. So practically 80% of the people are open to the idea as long as they know enough about it. And then, of course, there's always the 20% who is strongly against anything new. In this case, it's EVs. And that's fine. They can do that. That's okay. Over the years, they will learn. They'll figure it out that actually this works really well. But we don't have to be too worried about this at all. They will make a lot of noise, and it's good to have discussions with them, but don't feel frustrated if people don't necessarily get it. That's okay. Sooner or later, they will. So one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about is why EVs actually make more sense in rural America. We have had this discussion in the past that, hey, EVs were great in the metro areas, but in rural, you still need gas. Well, that's not necessarily the case, especially nowadays, not anymore. So one of the things that we have to remember is that rural households use much more funds on transportation. And more you drive, more you save with EVs. So EVs actually provide much bigger savings opportunity for folks in rural areas if they drive more. That is a very, very important thing. And when they understand that, that'll definitely help them to move to this direction. The other thing that makes this easier nowadays is that, of course, range has changed considerably. We have talked about this in the past, where in our first Nissan Leaf had only 73 miles of range, and that was very common in 10 years ago. Right now, average EV that is sold has over 250 miles of range. So the range is not the same kind of issue anymore, and therefore this works much better for rural areas too. Home charging is usually pretty easy to set up at rural areas because people usually have more space. They can figure out where they're parking their vehicle. They have usually an easier access to the power and so forth than in a small city lots, or not to mention multi-unit dwellings, apartment buildings and condominiums, where it's much harder. if you have a home in rural area, usually you have a bit more flexibility there. So that makes charging infrastructure setup easier for you. Households also have multiple vehicles. So when I speak with people, especially in rural areas, oftentimes I ask them, well, how many, do you have two cars in your family? And they answer, no, I actually have 5. I'm like, great. The only thing you have to do is just have one EV in your family to get an idea. So when they don't have to replace all of their vehicles as EVs. They don't have to replace their most favorite vehicle right now with EVs. They can keep that. That's fine. But if they get one EV in their family and they start to use it, they very soon learn that that's actually the vehicle that they will start to use the most. And then things start to move from there, as we know. So anyways, that's again, we don't have to be saying, okay, now you have to change all your cars to EVs and that's that. No, you can just get one and start it out, see how it is, and go from there. Access to gas fueling infrastructure is more limited in rural areas. You might have to drive to closest town to get your car charged with gas or your gas tank filled. Whereas again, we know what EVs, you can charge it at home. So it is much easier to do than what it is when you have to play with gas. Also, the federal home charging incentive that can be up to 30% or max 30% up to $1,000. It's going to be only available in rural areas and low-income neighborhoods starting 1st of January next year. There are different kind of limitations here, and it's not totally clear how this is going to be, but how I'm reading it, there's a good likelihood that this is what happens. This at the same time is a good thing to know for those who don't have home charging infrastructure and you would like to take advantage of the federal tax credit. Now it's time to install it before the end of the year if you want to do that, to make sure that you actually are getting it, unless you are living in rural areas or low-income neighborhoods. So that's that. But again, supporting the rural areas more. New federal funding will increase the public charging infrastructure, of course, in rural areas. So that way we can have more charging infrastructure there. That'll help everyone there. And when you shift away from oil and using electricity, you're not paying your transportation dollars anymore to the big oil companies, but they're going into your local electric utility company. So much bigger portion of those funds is staying in your local economy. Use, first of all, saving money because it's cheaper for you to drive. You can use that in local economy. You're paying to the local utility company. Much bigger portion of that stays in your local economy. So it's definitely a local economy booster when people move into driving electric. And then there's a lot of options of how to use the vehicle to load power output features that many of these vehicles have, especially the pickup trucks. I truthfully can't really come up with any good ways I could use that kind of a vehicle to load feature where I could use my power tools or anything like that in my metro area house, and I'm not doing anything outside of the house where I would need the high power tools or anything like that. But if I would be living in rural area, I would come up with dozens of different ways I could use the power to load feature in there. Having grown up in a farm, I know that there's always something you need to do where you would need the power outside of your home, and these vehicles will provide you that. So that's excellent feature for those too. Well, good news, of course, is that we had the Motor Trend's Truck of the Year just announced, I think 2 weeks ago, and surprise, surprise, Ford F-150 Lightning got that. So that tells a lot of how people are seeing EVs nowadays. We are having them winning these contests or competitions, and Motor Trend has been very traditional automotive media outlet, and now they are saying, yep, for this year, Ford F-150 Lightning is better, or the best of all the trucks. Not just best of EVs, all the trucks. The funny thing is that last year, Rivian R1T was their truck of the year. So they have now 2 EV trucks in a row already being best. We'll see next year if a Cybertruck comes out, if that'll be next year's best truck. That remains to be seen, but it's very good to see. At the same time, this year, out of the finalists of all vehicles in their categories, I think there were like 1/3 of them were EVs, and I wouldn't be surprised if half of them will be EVs next year on their finals. So we shall see. Of all the categories this year, also the best SUV of the year was won by Hyundai Ioniq 5. That is a full electric vehicle too. So again, we are seeing the shift happening in different ways. This is one of them. Talking about the electric pickup trucks, I did show you this slide last year as part of this, but still, this is still very strong trend. So I want to talk a little bit about this. We have learned more this year how this is moving, and it's very, very interesting. The Ford F-150 Lightning that you just saw there being a Motor Trend's truck of the year, it really, I can very easily see why that happened. It is an excellent vehicle in so many ways. I had an opportunity to drive one provided by Roseau County Ford for a week this summer, and I really loved it. People usually say that electric vehicles are like a magic carpet ride, and I don't necessarily always say that would be the case. Electric vehicles are always great, but magic carpet ride, that's sometimes taking a little far. But the funny thing is that this truck it's just very, 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 very weird experience because it's totally quiet. You would think that truck like this big truck would actually make a lot of noise, even the tire noise, but nothing. This is one of the quietest vehicles I've ever been in. So that's one thing. Then second thing is that it's really soft suspension. So it is like sitting on the edge of the cloud there when you're driving it. And then of course it has all the power in the world. So it is really, really fun to drive. So that I'm not surprised that it was picked by Motor Trend to be a truck of the year. Ford, of course, has over 200,000 reservation holders for the truck. A year ago they stopped taking any reservations, and then they have allowed people to start taking the first orders this year. So far they have delivered probably like 15,000 units. They still have 185,000 reservation holders. They're waiting to get the truck. And those were the first reservation holders before anyone could actually drive the truck. Now when people have had an opportunity to drive the truck, there would be plenty more. But of course, they haven't even opened up the reservations for anyone anymore. So it'll take them a couple of years to get through it. Hopefully, what they're saying is the next year, year from now at this time, they would be in a situation where they could say that they could produce 100,000 units a year. They will not produce 100,000 units next year. If I would have to guess something, I would say 50,000, maybe. Just a wild guess. I don't think that anyone knows for sure. But anyways, they still have a few years to go through the first reservation holders. And after that, there's plenty of other people who want to buy it. So ton of market for it. A good example of how we are so limited by production, not by demand. There's no shortage of demands for EVs right now, and we can see it very clearly with pickup trucks. Rivian R1T has actually, Rivian has produced the same amount of trucks, so probably around 15,000 right now this year, and they again have probably 100,000 reservation holders for that, so that's good. Chevy will come next year out with their Silverado, which will be very good comparison car to the Ford F-150 Lightning. Very comparable vehicle, and they have over 100,000 reservation holders for that. GMC has had their Hummer out for a while. That's just wild beast in many ways, but they have their production numbers are just hundreds. So they haven't really produced much of them. And then of course we have the Tesla Cybertruck that kind of started all of this. Tesla announced it years ago already, but they haven't produced a single one. We are hoping to see next year. They're talking that next year, 2023 will be the year when Tesla comes out with their Cybertruck, and I hope that that'll happen. That'll be very, very good car for us, or truck for us. And they have over 1.5 million people waiting for that one. So again, Tesla has no problems in finding buyers for that one. So it's so cool to see. All right, reminding everyone, download the evinfolist.com periodically. Just updated it couple weeks ago, so it should be pretty up to date. And that is your first thing when you start to look at what's your next car, is to look at what is on the list there, what are the specs there, what might work for you, and so forth. I'll give you a little bit of a comparison here, or idea what has happened over the years. In 2012, we had 4 EVs available. We had Nissan Leaf, we had Mitsubishi i-MiEV, we had Tesla Roadster, and Chevy Volt were the practical vehicles available. 2015, we had 12 vehicles available. That was the first time we put out the EV info list, but that's what the list looked like at that point. Now, if you look at 2022, we have the same list, has 5 pages, over 60 vehicles on that list there. So page number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So much more options available when it comes to the different models. Again, the vehicle availability is challenging. I'll talk a little bit more about that. What you should, how you potentially, or what are the best strategies for finding these vehicles at the dealerships when you're ready to buy them. So that's that. But again, much more vehicles available. And the other thing that I have to say about EVs is that they have been really good vehicles, all of them. So manufacturers know that these are very important cars and trucks for them. Every time they put the new EV out, spotlight is on them. That how is this going to perform? How is this going to work? And pretty much everything has been really, really excellent vehicles. So I don't have any hesitation to say people just pick whatever EV works for you. It'll be fine. So that has been very good to see. So what should you think about if you're considering buying a new or used EV next year or even this year? Of course, this time of the year is usually a very good time. I'll start first this year. This time of the year is usually a very good time to buy an EV because manufacturers want to increase their sales at the end of the year. So they want to sell as many as they can get out of the door. So that's usually a good time to buy any vehicle. And that, of course, is true for EVs too. At the same time, now when we are a little bit in a transition with the federal tax credit things, so it depends on what car you buy, what's your tax incentive for it. And first of all, if you are a higher income buyer, you will have some limitations next year when it comes to EVs. So you might not qualify for tax credit anymore. Also, if you're buying a higher end EV, you might not get a tax credit for it next year anymore because there's limits of the price of the vehicle. So those are the things that you should consider. If you want to try to get an EV this year, that you would still get the tax credit for it, you should look at something that is being made in the US. So for example, and then of course, you can have Tesla doesn't have anymore the tax credits this year, or GM doesn't have them either. Next year they will, but not this year. So for example, if you look at the list here that we are seeing, I think the only ones that would be available to have a tax credit this year out of these vehicles would be Mustang Mach-E, Volkswagen ID4, assuming that is built here in the US, so you would have to check that, and then the Jeep Wrangler. So those would be the only ones on this page that would still be available to have a tax credit this year. But again, that's pretty limited right now, but I'm just giving this tip to anyone who is like, all right, what should I get for my Christmas present here? If you want an EV and want a tax credit, look at those things. Next year, the tax credit most likely for all the vehicles that are manufactured in the US. First of all of them they have to be at least assembled in the US. And I'm assuming that pretty much all of them will have max 3,750 tax credit available. Not higher. Very few, if any, will have 7,500 tax credit because of the limits in them. We shall see. I'm not sure about this, but that's just my assumption. What the situation most likely will be. And for example, Tesla, that hasn't had the tax credit available for a couple of years now because they have produced and sold more vehicles. Now it's coming back to them, but I'm assuming that it'll be only in a level of 3,750, half of it. We'll see. But they are, for example, for some of the models, if not all, I don't remember what their criteria for it and how they're doing it, but they're actually giving at the end of this year a rebate of 3,750. So if you're thinking about the Tesla, you might already get the lower price this year because of that. So that's that. But no matter how you're looking at and what vehicles you're looking at, thinking about next year, 2023, buying a new EV, I would say that first of all, go test drive them if you can. If you can't find them at the stores, talk with different EV owners who might actually be driving them about their experiences. Maybe they could give you even a ride with one. That'd be awesome. And then just choose the dealership that you want to work with and order it. You just put the order in and wait. And at the same time, when you order it, you can still shop around. You can still keep calling the different dealers and see if someone actually happens to get one in and someone else has ordered, and they might have decided differently in the meantime, and then you could potentially get that car. I've heard many people being successful with this strategy, that they have their own order in and then they will get something else that is close enough for them that they're willing to buy and get it sooner because someone else has dropped the order. But that's the thing, we have to learn more of a order vehicles. And again, in Europe, majority of the cars are bought this way. People go and test drive the vehicles, then they decide, then they go to the dealership, then they are at the dealership, and then they decide what color, what trim level, what kind of features, all of that. They just like tick all the boxes so they get exactly the kind of car that they want. So that's one thing there. The other thing is that there are some vehicles that are better available locally here than others. Out of this list, for example, Teslas have been pretty decently available. Right now, I think there's a very good availability for some of the Tesla models. One of the reasons for that is that Tesla's demand has softened quite a bit recently. And there are, of course, different theories why that is. I have the theory that Elon Musk's recent activities, so to say, have not helped Tesla's sales, and that will continue. So therefore, there might be a better availability for Teslas right now and in the future because of that. Other vehicles pretty well available locally, Polestar. The Polestar 2 that you can see there in the middle of that picture, we have a Polestar dealership or a store. It's not even called store, it's a space. I'm sorry, it's called Space. It's by Porton Volvo, close by there. Do the service at Porton Volvo, and it's at the West End mall there where the store is. But there's only 18 other stores in the US, and therefore they have a higher allocation, so they have gotten more units. So therefore, availability of Polestar 2s are much better than many of the other models here in Minnesota. And they are excellent cars. So go test drive them there. You'll have fun with it. The other vehicle that I think will have a decent availability also is a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid, because White Bear Mitsubishi has been one of the leading Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid dealerships in the whole country. And they have put a lot of effort into it. and therefore they are getting a lot of allocation. So White Bear Mitsubishi will be the place to check that. The others, it's more of a hit and miss. Some dealers get sometimes a Hyundai Ioniq 5s or Kia EV6s or Jeep Wranglers and Volkswagen ID4. So you just have to be much more active in getting those. When it comes to the used EVs, you have to be active on that front too. GS Motors is one of the used EV dealerships here. We have oftentimes at our Minnesota EV owners group, people are posting the EVs that they're selling when they're upgrading to something else. That's a good place to be at if you wanna learn more about that and potentially get the first tips on some of the EVs that our members are selling. And then taking into account the used federal tax credit that is coming available next year. So beginning of January 1st, so just 16 days from now, you potentially could have up to $4,000 off of the price of the vehicle. The new used EV has to be cheaper than $25,000. So that's one limitation there. It has to be older than 2 years, and there are also income limitations to it. But again, we can talk more about that during the Q&A part if you want to know more about it. So let me know about that at that point. All right. Let's move forward. Just a reminder, people, about charging. First of all, home is where most of the charging happens. Over 85% of the charging happens at home. In our case, for example, my wife has driven 10 years with electric cars and never used a public charging station. Myself, I only use public charging station when I drive long distances, and that's very common for people. So home is where most of the charging happens. Every car, I wouldn't say every car, almost every new vehicle, new EV comes with the level 1 cord set. Some of them have actually dropped that cord set, so you might have to buy it, but usually it's pretty affordable, like $200, something like that, to add that cord set if the vehicle doesn't come with it. But you can just use your normal household outlet to charge your car. The limitation with that is that how much we can pull power out of that outlet. So these work well if you're driving less than 30 miles a day. If you're driving more than 30 miles a day on average, then recommendation is go with the level 2 charging. And this is a 240 volt charging station. And the idea with this one is that with this, you should be able to charge your car full no matter how much you drive. So overnight, you should be able to charge your car full. You can see a home charging station there on the left there, the white one, and then you can see a public charging station by it there. The basic home charging stations cost $500 to $600, and they're very easy to install, just 3-wire installation, so any electrician can do that. Then, of course, the fastest way to charge your EV is to use DC fast charging station. So these usually you're using for 20 to 40 minutes when you're going somewhere and you want to just charge up and continue going. This is the setup we used to have. It's just like one of these refrigerator size units for our charging. This is the old way. Nowadays, the new installation should look more like this, where you have at least 4, potentially even more charging cords at the same location. So you have a redundancy there at the location, whichever way it's done. But that way we have more of these available, so people, when they arrive at the location, there's a much higher likelihood that they actually can use one, so they are not all taken. And then if there's something wrong with the one cord, there are still some others that will work. So should also help with the reliability. So that's more how you should look at the DC fast charging station in the future. And if you happen to be working with charging infrastructure installations, my quick tip on what to think there is that think about the dwell time. Think about how long people will be staying at this location. What's their preferred dwell time here? If it's minimum 8 hours, some locations like workplaces, you might be able to do level 1 charging. Not very common, but sometimes you could do that. But more, if you think about the dwell time in hours, consider level 2 charging stations. If you think about the dwell time in minutes, then DC fast charging. And that's why, for example, when you have a grocery stores or malls or something like that, DC fast charging is what we start to see on them. And level 2 charging is more used in places like hotels, where people are going to be staying for hours. So that's that. All right. One of the things that I wanted to quickly talk with you is that is pretty hot discussion item nowadays is that this hydrogen that is coming up, and just want to point out that it's really having hard time competing with EVs. I just don't see it really competing with EVs. So just wanted to give you a little bit of information about it and just real life calculation what it looks like. The challenge with hydrogen is that it's even though there's of course plenty of hydrogen in our world, it's commonly in, for example, water, and to split the water takes a lot of energy, and that's where the challenge is, that it's not efficient at all. If we think about it this way, that we have a 50 kilowatt hours of electricity, let's start with that. And if you're using electrolysis to make hydrogen out of water with that electricity, the challenge is that you have only 60% efficiency, so you're left with 30 kilowatt hours worth of hydrogen. Okay, fine, but you lost 40% on that production process there. So if you now take that 30 kilowatt hours of hydrogen and pump it into the or charge, I don't know what's the best way to say that, but put it into the one of the most efficient hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, Toyota Mirai, and then drive with that 30 kilowatt hours of hydrogen. Toyota Mirai gets 47 miles per gallon equivalent efficiency. Then you could drive 66 miles with that 30 kilowatt hours of hydrogen. So that's that. And we're not taking into account of any of the challenges that you have with storage and transportation of hydrogen and all of that. There's plenty of limitations with that, but just thinking about the energy efficiency, if you do this process, 66 miles is how far you can drive. If you take that same 50 kilowatt hours of electricity that we started with and charge one of the most efficient electric vehicles out there, Tesla Model 3, with that 50 kilowatt hours of energy, you can drive 211 miles with that. So real life example of what's the difference between hydrogen and electricity as an energy transportation method. And so there's just no way hydrogen can compete in this one. Maybe we'll see hydrogen in some of the airplanes or stuff like that, but I've already seen that I don't think they will even use for the medium and heavy duty vehicles because they just can't compete with electricity. That's where we are. Just wanted to share with you that. So when you come across this one, you can at least look at it from this perspective. All right, we're really going to electrifying everything. I think I showed you this slide last year already, but want to go back to it and just remind people is that we are going to be electrifying the buses. We are going to be electrifying some of the airplanes. That's already happening. Outboard motors and all of that. Really great opportunities. Delivery vans. This year we'll hopefully start to see some of those in Twin Cities. That'll be great. And of course, for all small engine units, there's so many more electric options nowadays out in the market that I would highly recommend everyone to going with electric because they already have the power and everything, and that way you don't have to be playing with gas when you're doing these. I'll give you one quick example here about, for example, bus fleet things. And here's a picture from my country of origin and my hometown, Savonlinna, where they are actually the first city in Finland to fully have electric bus fleet there, taking care of all the local transportation there. So you can see the charging stations there and the electric bus there, and how they can do this. And it's kind of cool idea because Savonlinna has only like 30,000 people. It's smaller than Mankato. And here's a map of the bus lines. They have actually just 4 bus lines there, and they can take care of all of their local transportation in with the buses with only 8 buses. That's why they can actually be the first ones to fully electrify all of their bus fleet there in Savonlinna. At the same time, we have, for example, in capital of Finland, Helsinki has over 300 electric buses already, but they don't have all electric yet. Whereas Savonlinna will get that bragging right by electrifying their 8 buses, which is shifting that all the electric. So that's very cool. Now, if you look at the map there and look at like, wow, that's pretty funky looking town because it's built in 3 islands. And it is in the middle of the biggest lake area in Europe. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. This is what Savonlinna looks like in real life. So if you looked at the map and it looked like there's a lot of water, yep, there is a lot of water, and that's that. And that's of course what it looks like in summertime. And this is what it looks like in the wintertime. And why I'm sharing with you this one, that's because I'm going there for holidays tomorrow. So I'm flying to Finland and going to Savonlinna to enjoy the holidays, coming back after New Year's. So that's where I'm heading. And that was my portion of the thing. I'll give it back to Joe here. And before we go into Q&A.
Jukka, so I think what we should be telling our guests on the webinar is that now is their chance to ask you questions because, like you said, you're getting on a plane tomorrow, and I hope you will be signing off of everything and only doing family stuff. So that's a reminder for people to use the Q&A. I do see a lot of like questions and comments in the chat. I will try to go through those, but if you want to make sure your question is answered, throw it in the Q&A, and then I definitely will not miss it.
I most likely will not be answering the phone if you have some last minute EV questions before you're making decision before the end of the year. So that's exactly
Okay.
right.
All right, I'm gonna have to make a mental note for myself on that too. So before we go right into the Q&A, I just wanted to throw out a quick plug and invite people to engage more with Fresh Energy. So I will be sending you all an email after this event. Actually, to be honest, it'll probably be Monday because I'm taking some time off tomorrow, with a video recording of this webinar for you to share, pass around, do whatever you want with. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. But then also remember, Fresh Energy has an entire webpage dedicated to electrification, and we've got Jukka's lists, and actually maybe I do need to update that. We've got Jukka's lists, we've got electric lawnmower lists, electric snowblower lists, which is important for days like today. But then also become a donor to Fresh Energy. We're doing a super special thing right now where if you make a donation of $30 or more, we will send you a pair of wool socks like the ones in the picture. They have wind turbines and solar panels on them and Fresh Energy's logo too. And donations like that help us host events like this with Jukka. So with that, I think Jukka, you can stop sharing your screen and let's do a little bit of Q&A, shall we?
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, well, so the first, I think most important question is from Brian, asks if your hat is traditional holiday garb. And I know we joked about that before we started, and I see you never took it off. So you must be very committed to this hat.
Yeah. It's nice. It's warm. This is actually felted wool. This one, and it's made by my mom. So this is definitely a holiday style jule. Jouluhattu, tonttuhattu in Finnish. So that's why I'm wearing it right now.
All right, Brian, you heard it here first. So then Mary is asking about the credits or the rebates. So Mary says, when you say $7,500 credit, is that a rebate or a tax credit? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, it kind of depends, right?
Well, it's a tax credit right now.
Yes.
So that's where it is. It will become more of a rebate beginning of 2025, if I remember right.
Okay.
I'm just looking at my own slides and I'm looking at them. I don't have it here. Do I have it somewhere here? What? I didn't write it in my slide. That's pretty bad of me. Anyways, I think in 2 years you will have an opportunity to to give that credit to the dealership, and dealership has to give you rebate that is exactly the same amount.
Okay.
So at that point, that's possible. Right now, it's still as a tax credit, so you will have to pay for the full price of the vehicle, and then you
file.
can get it during when you're filing your taxes.
Okay, and that's over, and that credit's going to be available for 10 years. Is that correct?
10 years, that's right. So now we actually have all of these new things in place for next 10 years, unless of course somebody changes the law, which could happen. But this is how the law is written, is that it's next 10 years.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then Lisa is asking, if I sell my old Nissan Leaf, is it the new owner that gets the tax credit, and I can just keep that in mind when choosing the price?
Very good question. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It only goes through the dealership. So only if you buy the used EV from the dealership, then the new buyer can get the up to $4,000 tax credit for it. They have done this, written this into law because they kind of thought that people will start to sell the cars to each other and get a tax credit, which most likely would have happened. So I think from that perspective, it's understandable.
Do you think, and this is my own question, that dealerships will see an opportunity for themselves to be like almost a broker between people?
Well, they already are. I mean,
Okay.
that's how they already operate. But definitely, you will just have to sell it to the dealership, and dealership will
Then
take
they'll-
that into account. So maybe you have a little better negotiation opportunity there when you're selling it to dealership. Maybe it's more valuable for them because of that.
So then I have another. Let's step away. We'll come back to like tax and IRA stuff, but let's do some technical stuff right now. So
Okay.
Melissa asks, how do loads affect range and the need to recharge? So Melissa's thinking specifically of bikes and kayaks that Melissa currently hauls on their Prius.
Yeah, so loads as a weight don't impact that much, but the aerodynamic losses will have an impact. And I'm sure you have already noticed that if you're driving with your Prius 70 miles per hour, having your kayak on top of your Prius, you will see a lower MPG numbers for that trip. The same applies to the electric vehicles. It's because of the aerodynamic losses and on highway speeds. It doesn't matter really if you're driving a slower speeds in city or any of that, but when you get into higher speeds like highways, then you will start to see losses.
Okay.
And they can have an impact. There's no question about it. So that's one of the reasons, for example, why I like to haul my bike if I go somewhere inside the car, because I can just put it in there. Then I don't have any aerodynamic losses because of that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So then another question from Miranda. Miranda asks, are any upgrades coming with the Ford e-Transit? All-wheel drive, more battery capacity, heat pump, anything that you know of?
So Ford e-Transit, if you're talking about the van that was just introduced this year, I haven't heard any upgrades right now for the next year, because it's a so new product. I would expect the upgrades to come maybe 2 or 3 years into the product cycle. So I'm assuming that the e-Transit will be the same that it was this year.
Okay. So then Philip is asking, what is the time frame where Electrify America or a similar entity will have a charging network similar to Tesla? Will there be several networks? Will they cooperate in such a way that one app might rule them all?
What I would assume, I mean, next 3 to 4 years, we'll see a lot of charging infrastructure installation. Then that will continue from there on. So right now, in some ways, actually, there is more DC fast charging stations already than the Tesla has of other non-Tesla ones. But when it comes to the driving long distances, Tesla is clearly still the king because they have the better locations for them. They are more spread out.
Sure.
Others are more in the cities, and that has been the challenge. But we will see more and more of those, and I would say 2 years maybe we'll have a comparable charging infrastructure network. 3 years, 2-3 years, something like that. What I think will happen when it comes to the using of these stations is that we will start to see, first of all, more credit card payment systems, more reliable credit card payment systems, so that you can just use any station just with your credit card, just pay it and go. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to be member of the things if you don't want to. If you are a member of certain Electrify Americas and EVgo's and others, then you probably have a lower rate. But if it's just a couple of bucks and you don't do it that often, you're like, whatever, I'm just going to pay with my credit card, be happy with it when that happens. So that is definitely something that we will see. There is a big promise with plug and charge, meaning that you could just plug your car in and it would recognize which car this is. And therefore you could then, the payment would automatically work. Based on that, you wouldn't have to do anything. We have not seen that implemented as fast as we would have liked to recently. So that I would think that that's still a 2 to 3 years before we start to see a big implementation of that. Hope to be wrong about that. Hope we will have majority in plug and charge next year, but I don't think that'll happen.
So I want to call attention to Alan's comment in the chat. So Alan says, yesterday I used a ChargePoint app to find a non-ChargePoint level 2 and paid via ChargePoint. So that's kind of interesting.
There are more and more interconnections between these different suppliers and networks, so we can start to see more of that. But really, I mean, I just think that for when we start to have a new EV owners who had never have used EVs, they don't necessarily want to be signing up to certain networks. Sure. What they want is the simplicity of just using their credit card and going. And I've experienced that in Finland, where I've been renting an EV there, and I come across with some charging station, and I'm like, great, I can use this, and then it just goes through the hassle of, oh, I have to now download this app and start to use. I'm like, that's just too much. Just make it so simple that I can just use the credit card, pay it, and not have to think about anything else.
So we have a bunch more questions, but I would think I would be remiss since we're talking about charging. Charging, I think this past year plus has kind of been your bread and butter. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the kind of new and innovative charging work that you've been doing in Minnesota and beyond? Like, do you want to give the quick scoop on that?
Well, I'll be just saying I've been working on the DC fast charging side quite a bit recently. I do represent the Finnish manufacturer Kempower that has a bit more innovative approach to the market that I think than many of the others do. And the basic idea is that we just have to have more dispensers at any location. So you can in their system, there's a separate power cabinet and then small dispensers that make it much more flexible. There are many ways to do that, but key to the whole thing is definitely whatever systems is used is that there should be a much more cords at any given location, so that we have the redundancy and flexibility and reliability at those locations. And the other thing that we want to also make sure is that they are easy to service. The maintenance, making sure that, because always when it comes to technology, something will break sooner or later. And key there is that you can very fast service them so that they are back up and running. And even if you have one piece failure there, that doesn't take out the whole system. There's still a redundancy there, so that even if one cord is off or one power module is not working in the system, the rest of them will work. And it just sends the note to the network provider that, hey, I'm having a little issues with this piece of hardware here. The system will tell it automatically, and then they can send someone to just fix it easily. That's other key thing that we have to see. The whole uptime of these chargers is going to be very crucial in the future. We've seen some challenges with it with the first generation technology. Hoping that we can provide better technology in the future to make sure that doesn't happen.
So along those lines too, Lisa points out, I noticed a couple places where the charging station is free, like in St. Louis Park. Is the city just underwriting the cost to encourage EV use?
Well, traditionally, we've had those cases where people are different hosts, site hosts have provided free charging. I think we will see less and less of that in the future, which I think is a very good development. What I would like to see in public charging is that every charging station has some kind of cost associated to it, and I'm hoping that it's at least a little bit higher than what the home charging is, to make sure that those units are available for those who really need them, so that those who have home charging, they just use their home charging and be happy with it, and then the units are available for those that are actually needing it, and making sure that we have a best availability of the public charging infrastructure as possible.
Okay. All right, let's do a question from Beth. I'm going to circle us back to the IRA because I think it was inevitable. So Beth asks, how likely do you think it is that many EVs will qualify for the components made in America requirements in the IRA? And then Beth also asks, and which ones? But have you seen a list yet? Or like, what are your thoughts on this?
There's a couple of different hoops that they have to jump through. First of all, the vehicle itself has to be manufactured or assembled in the US. And this is a list that right now DOE has provided, that these are the vehicles that they are seeing that are assembled here, and these are the vehicles that they are expecting to be also available next year, that they are there. I can actually share the list here. Just a moment. So here's the list of those, and so it's somewhat limited list, but these would be the vehicles. And there has been a lot of different manufacturers that have been lobbying, they're saying, well, I think you should give us a little more time. You just announced it right away, and then we didn't have enough time to prepare to have the assembly line in the US. And that's true, but it looks like right now that this will be the law, if there will not be a new addition to it. What we have seen is that this requirement has really increased or accelerated the manufacturer's interest to start doing more manufacturing in the US. So it has been very, very helpful in that way. And so we'll see more and more. But anyways, this is the basic list of vehicles that right now are assembled in the North America. I shouldn't say the US, it's North America. And then of course there's, in addition to this, there are other requirements of that. And this is for the new electric vehicles, traction battery size minimum of 7 kilowatt hours. Everybody meets that. That's not an issue. Again, this brings the tax credit back to Tesla and GM. We talked about the final assembly here, but then split in half, just like MK said there. Critical mineral extraction, 3,750. Requirements for battery components, 3,750. And there isn't really a clear answer to this, how these are determined. So that's why it's really hard to make predictions of who will actually meet these requirements there. They also have the MSRP limits. So SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks up to 80,000, and all other vehicles up to 55,000. And then there's a buyer's annual income limits that are listed here. So those are the things. If we talk about the critical minerals requirement, that next year will be 40% of the critical minerals used there. And how the text says, and here's the text, and I'll just read it. It's not the exact, but this is to be eligible for the 3,750 critical minerals portion of the tax credit. The percentage of the value of batteries critical minerals that are extracted or processed in the United States or a US free trade agreement partner So it doesn't necessarily have to be in North America as long as it's a US free trade agreement partner country, or recycled in North America. So those are kind of the things there. And every year it gets higher. I don't talk about that. Then when we go to battery components requirements, to meet that one, it means that the percentage of value of the battery components that are manufactured or assembled in North America must increase according to the following schedule. So next year, that's 50% of the materials. And we don't know yet if the critical minerals are calculated to this or not. So again, it's a bit complicated. That's why we can't predict well. But I'm thinking that most of the manufacturers will probably have maximum 3,750 of this one, and not the full 7,500.
Got it. Thank you. I have I think it's like an engineering type question from Kevin for you, Jukka. Oh, this is your background. You got this. So Kevin says, there's a lot of emphasis on EV range, but I saw you using MPGE as a reason to favor EVs over hydrogen. Can you talk to the range of MPGE that is available in the market? And if we are interested in efficiency, what models we might look at? So first, explain MPGE and then models.
MPGE was put together by Department of Energy when they decided that they want to have a common system to compare EVs to traditional internal combustion engines, so that you can have an apples to apples comparison. And I think it was very good for them to do that, because kilowatt hours and kilowatts and all of that is not very common for people yet. They will learn about it. That's a good thing. When you start driving EV, you will actually learn about many things. But to get started with it for just average people, MPG is something that they know. Miles per gallon. You take 1 gallon of gas and you see how far you can drive with the car on that gallon of gas. Simple. Right now, average MPG for vehicles in the US new ones about 25. The comparison there was that DOE took the look at how much energy is in that gallon of gasoline, and that's 33.7 kilowatt hours of energy. So then they look at, okay, if you have 33.7 kilowatt hours of energy, you use the electricity in EVs, you take 33.7 kilowatt hours of electricity, and you look at how far can you drive with EVs with that same amount of energy, and then you get the MPGE, so miles per gallon equivalent. And for most of the EVs, we are usually talking about 100 or more in MPG numbers. So that can tell you that EV is actually 4 times more efficient than traditional cars in general. Or you could say the other way, anyone who switches from driving internal combustion engine to electric, overnight, they drop 3/4 of their energy consumption. So that's what the numbers tell us. What the numbers are for different cars, well, that again is depending on the cars. Usually the pure electrics have higher numbers, and usually the more aerodynamic the vehicle is, the better the numbers are. And if I, for example, show here, I'll share the screen again about our EV info list, you can find the MPGE numbers here from this list. So it's the 5th last column, 2 columns before my favorite column, which is the 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration, which you use to choose all the cars. These MPG numbers are just nice to know information, but the acceleration is what you use. Anyways, but if you're interested in MPGE, so you can see, for example, here we have Toyota BZ4X having MPGs of 115 in average. Toyota Prius Prime having 133 MPGE when it's driven in EV mode, and when it goes to the hybrid mode, then it has 54 miles per gallon in hybrid mode. The same with RAV4. Now you have a vehicle that is bigger and it has much more aerodynamic losses, you can see that MPG number is lower. So it's just under 100 there, 94. And then also for MPG, so in hybrid mode, it's 38. Volkswagen ID4, depending on what kind of setup, is 95 to 112 and so forth. If I go one back here, one of the Tesla has been really leading in many of these categories. They can definitely be under up to 140 with some of the models. But we can see really high numbers also, for example, giving you some of the Hyundai vehicles have been very good and so forth. So that's a number that you can check out there. And of course, when you look at some of the trucks like Ford F-150 Lightning, MPGe number might be less than 70, so it's much lower. But again, you are a much bigger vehicle, much heavier, and your comparison to pickup trucks is not anymore 25 miles per gallon, 150. You're probably talking more closer to half of that, or somewhere there like 15 miles per gallon comparison. So it is similar in that way. So that's miles per gallon equivalent.
Perfect. Thank you. I think Kevin's going to be happy with that answer. That was very thorough.
Okay.
So question from Mary, further elaboration on that tax credit. So Mary is asking if the tax credit can be spread over multiple years if you don't have much tax liability, which I do not think is the case. Is that correct?
It was not case before, but if I remember right, it is case now with the new law.
Is it?
But I'm not 100% sure about that. So don't trust me on this one. Talk with your tax expert and check it from them. But I kind of remember that they have now provided a more opportunity for it, but don't quote me on that one.
Okay.
I know that for the old one, it was not possible. So you had to have the tax liability. Whatever your max tax liability was, that's how big portion of that you could get. But I think with the new law, they provided more for it, but I'm not sure. So
Okay.
I won't answer that question officially. Officially,
Okay.
I have not answered the question. I have not said anything about this.
Okay, thank you. So Mary, it sounds like you might have a little bit more homework after this. Then I have another question from a different Mary. So Mary T is asking, are leased EVs a good idea? When is the best time to look for these? And Jukka, I think I have heard this answer from you a few times and you never change the script. So give Mary your classic answer.
What has been my classic answer?
Your
I think
answer is
I'm
just like,
changing my
I think
answer
it's
all the
just buy
time.
an EV, get an EV. There's no right time. If you want an EV, get an EV.
When it comes to timing, yes, sooner is better than later. So that's definitely my answer to it. There has not been any advantage of waiting for EVs in that way. For last 5 years, EVs have been a smart purchase always, so that's definitely the timing wise. When it comes to leasing, it definitely depends on what kind of leasing deal you get. But leasing for EVs is not necessarily a bad thing. In our family, we have leased 2 EVs. We've been really happy with both times when we did it. So just do the math. See if that works out to be the right thing for you. It definitely is one good option for people, and I would not steer anyone away from it. But make sure that you do the calculation.
And you prefer cars.com too, as like a place to look to buy used EVs. Is that correct?
New ones. I would say cars.com is a good way to start. Look at your what's available at the dealership, because they line up what's available at all the local dealerships or all the dealerships, and that way you can look at what's in the market. So I would definitely look at use the cars.com as a first thing. Then when you see something at some dealership, then you can go to actually dealers' own website and then confirm that they actually have those units. And oftentimes that's the case. And then you can call them. If you see something that they have there, just call them and make sure that the vehicles actually exist, because who knows, someone might have sold it just this morning. So and by the way, if you find an EV that you like, don't think overnight. You don't have that luxury nowadays in this market. If you find something you like, buy it right away. That's how it is. I've spoken with a couple of people who's like, yeah, I went to test drive this car. I really liked it. It was just had arrived at the dealership. And I said, I'll call them next day. And when I called them next day, they had already sold it. Yes.
Same rules as buying a house these days.
In many ways, yes.
So Mary's got another question about leased EVs. Is buying a leased EV a good idea? So I'm guessing, yeah, what that means is like formerly leased.
Yeah, so used one, it's like buying any other used car. I wouldn't say it's any better or worse than anything else.
Okay.
So I wouldn't again shy away from leased EVs when looking at the used ones. If they're the checking, there's the history check that you can do for these, and if that Carfax or something like that, if that looks good, that's already good. But whether it's leased or not, I wouldn't really put too much emphasis on that.
And Lisa is asking if Lisa needs to sell their leased. Oh, I'm sorry, too much leasing talk. Lisa asks, do I need to sell my Nissan Leaf to a dealership? But you can sell it to anyone.
You can sell it to anyone. I actually like selling cars. That's actually fun. Some people don't think that way. I do. It's fun thing to do. If you want to sell it yourself, first of all, make sure that it's in good shape, so you clean it up and do that so that it's very presentable. You write all the information about the vehicle. When it comes to Nissan Leaf, I would take the Leaf spy check, so you can show what the battery situation is. That's usually very good. And you can also pull the Carfax report or some similar report from the car and say, hey, and this is what it looks like. I've had this 3 years. This is the paper. It shows that I haven't had any big accidents or whatever. So you can show the history of that. And then just look at what's the market price of the vehicle. And then if I'm buying it, I usually try to price it lowest end of that market price, whatever I think makes sense. And that's how you can do it. The other option is just talk with the dealers and see what they are paying. And people used to get really good offers from these just used used vehicle companies like Carvana and others. I don't know if they are still giving the same kind of excellent prices. That used to be definitely the way to go for many people if they didn't want to sell it themselves. But otherwise, talk with the dealers about it. I know, for example, Rosedale Chevrolet that sells Chevy Bolts and others. They have been very active in buying used EVs too, because they want to keep selling EVs, even used ones.
How do you feel, Jukka, since you love selling cars so much? Do you want to sell my 2008 Prius for me?
2008 Prius? How much money do you want for
it? It only has 210,000 miles on it.
Only that? Yeah.
You're going to take a pass?
The value of that one is not going to be too high. And for that one, you don't have to too much work. You just list it as is, and then someone who really needs it will buy it. So in that case, when the value starts to be that low, you can do much less and find the right buyer at that point.
Okay, so I have a question from Mary, and my husband's asked me a similar question before as we were looking at EVs. So Mary says, how important is a heat pump? And then like tangential to this is that my husband was complaining that some models sold in the US have electric resistance heat, but then the Canada version has heat pump heaters. And so can you dissect, like, number one, how important a heat pump is, to answer Mary's question, but then also like, why not in the US for some of these models?
Manufacturers make decisions based on whatever they produce, and then they will allocate them in the different markets. And in this case, some models, they have done that. Heat pump, of course, is more efficient way to produce the heat, especially in a more temperate climates, temperatures. If it gets really cold, you're still back in the resistive heating. So that's the thing. You don't get advantage of the heat pump in really cold weather. But like today, definitely you would get less energy consumption with heat pump. Heat pump is much more important if you have a smaller battery pack, like you have a first generation or even second generation Nissan Leafs with the 24 kilowatt hour battery pack or even 30 kilowatt hour battery pack, even 40, because there every kilowatt hour counts when you have a smaller battery. When you start to have bigger batteries, let's take a Tesla Model 3 that has over 75 kilowatt hours of battery pack. In there, heat pump, it has some advantage, but it's not as meaningful there. So I wouldn't, for example, there put too much effort into finding a heat pump one over non-heat pump because it just doesn't have the same impact. So that's how I would look at the heat pump.
And with that, Jukka, I think you just got through all the questions.
Oh, is that so? Great.
Yeah, with 5 minutes to spare.
That's very good.
Well done. And thank you everyone for being with us today. I hope that you got your questions answered. Hopefully you didn't walk away with more questions than you came with. And Jukka, do have safe travels home. And I look forward to not hearing from you for the next couple weeks. And we will check back in the new year.
Yep. Happy New Year, everyone. See you then.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.